Today I'm sharing all the books I read in January. Welcome to Candlewick Library. I'm Cheryl. I was kind of surprised I was able to read so many books in January, but it gives me hope for February since I have a very ambitious TBR for February as well. I'm going to go through my challenges first and share the books that I was able to cross off for my monthly challenges. As I showed in my reading journal video, I am doing Chantel at Chantel Reads All Day, her Read Your Bookshelf challenge this year with the Maud and Doyle sides. And I decided I wanted to try to do both sides. If I ever only get to one, then the next month I'll have to do the one in that side first before I can try another one in the other side. But the first month in January, I was able to accomplish it. So they were on the Maud side, a book with a cat on the cover, and I read Tucker's Countryside. This is a sequel to Cricket in Times Square, and it is by George Selden. I really liked this. I thought it was very cute. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. I do have a slight problem with this book though, and this might be nitpicky. You may not agree with me. But in this book, Chester Cricket and Harry the cat go into the countryside to help Tucker the mouse because where he lives, they are going to start bulldozing this meadow and building something there. The kids in the neighborhood and a lot of the people in the neighborhood don't want it to be bulldozed. The animals all know that they're going to have to find a new home if it is. I'm going to have a little bit of a spoiler here. So if you don't want to hear, then fast forward to when I'm holding up the next book. So they decide to use some things that they found and make it seem as if they belong to this man that's important. When they first found the things, I thought that that was actually what was real. And I was like, oh, that's a great ending to the story. But it turns out they're faking it. And I feel like it shows that they're lying, that these animals are going to make up a hoax, and that it works, and everything works out great. And I don't think that's a very good message for a kid's book. And I know that it can open up a conversation with your child, but I was like, if he had just made that the real thing, that they really did find these things, and the whole story was true, it would have been a great book. And there would have been no reason to not like it. I don't know why he made it where they were faking it. And one of the animals even said, "Isn't that a lie?" I wish this had ended differently. The Doyle side was a book with a dog on the cover, and I chose Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. You can tell I added a lot of tabs to this. It has deckled edges, so I put them out the top so I could actually find my place again. I loved this book. This book forced me to read a little slower than I normally do, and not much really happened, but yet it still held my interest. He really made me want to go back to Montana after the way he described it. A few of the quotes that I really loved in this: "A journey is a person in itself, no two are alike." And then when he said, "We don't take a trip, it takes us." So my trips are always very meticulously planned in a binder, but they never go quite to plan. Another quote that I really liked was when he said, "I wonder why progress often looks like destruction." That quote could go back to Tucker's Countryside of that they think it's progress to build these apartment buildings, but they're destroying this beautiful meadow. And that is actually something that bothers me a lot. I am not against progress in a lot of forms, but I feel like, paraphrasing Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, we ask if we can do it, not if we should. One part that made me laugh is when he's trying to get through a border and he says, "I have never smuggled anything in my life. Why then do I feel an uneasy sense of guilt on approaching a customs barrier?" That made me laugh because I always feel that way in stores. If I go in and I don't buy anything and I go out pretty fast, I'm always like, no, I didn't steal anything, and I think a lot of us feel that way. But anyway, there's so many quotes I could do from that book. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. In my quest to read all the Sherlock Holmes books, this month I read The Sign of Four. This book introduces us to the character of Mary, and it's basically about a treasure and kind of a secret society. It was really good. I loved it. It was pretty short and it kept my attention the whole time. So continuing forward, I'm still loving Sherlock Holmes and Arthur Conan Doyle's writing. For Paperback and Ponytail's Read Around the World Readathon, the January prompt was a packing list item on the cover. So I chose A Beautiful Disguise by Rosanna M. White. And I chose this because she is holding a purse, and I thought, yeah, I take a purse on vacation, so that counts. I really loved this book. It was not what I expected at all. I knew that the storyline was going to have something to do with spies or secret identities, things like that, but I didn't know fully what I was getting myself into. And the first chapter sucked me in immediately, without giving too much detail about them trying to get information and the way that they're doing it. I found the characters to be really lovable. I liked all of the main characters. They were so different for this time period, but I still found them believable. In this story, Marigold and her brother are left pretty destitute after their parents die. Their dad had been very wealthy, but he'd spent most of his money on frivolous things. And they're using that to their advantage by the frivolous things that they grew up with, theater troupes and circus acrobats, using the talents that they got from enjoying those things when they were small to use now to get information. And they have created a group called the Imposters, and they are anonymous, but they go around and they get information for people, basically private investigators, but nobody knows who they are. And in this, they have a new client who is investigating the father of Marigold's best friend. If you like spies, or if you like secret intelligence types of things, I think you would like this. For the Buzzwordathon, I had to cheat a little bit. The words were there, and there, the 3 different versions of that. I didn't check my books I already owned because I always try to use books I haven't read yet for these challenges. But out of all the books I have that I haven't read yet, I didn't have a single book with any of those words in the title. So I cheated, and in Under the Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer, there is all of this writing on the cover. And on this it says, on July 24th, 1984, a woman and her infant daughter were murdered by 2 brothers who believed they were ordered to kill by God. The roots of their crime lie deep in the history of an American religion practiced by millions. With the word they in that little description, I decided that there is they are, so that counted. And even though it wasn't in the full title, it was on the cover, so I counted it. I watched the series Under the Banner of Heaven on Hulu a couple of years ago when I was first unraveling my Mormon faith. I found it very interesting, but I also knew that not everything in it was completely accurate. And so I've wanted to read the book ever since. And when I found this at the used bookstore for a few dollars, I thought, okay, I'll read it now. I liked this so much more than I even thought I was going to. It was fascinating. It was hard to read. There are things in it that I normally wouldn't read in a book, with swearing and things like that. But when it is a memoir and they're quoting people, then I don't DNF it if it's that kind of a situation, because they are giving me the full picture. So I do have a little bit different rules for something that is nonfiction. When I'm done with my No Man Knows My History series, I am going to be continuing to do some of those kind of things. Then I'm going to be doing a full review of this book, because I underlined a lot and I have a lot to say about this book and the series that goes along with it. I was also able to read 3 books that counted for my G3 Ministries challenge for the year. One of the challenges was a book on the Holy Spirit, and I got this, The Silent Shepherd by John MacArthur. I think this is good, but it didn't answer the questions I had. It gave me a few more questions, actually. So I am still going to, keep reading in the Bible and in other sources to try to learn more about the Holy Spirit. But I do think this was a good book and well written, but it was not my favorite John MacArthur book. For a book on literature, visual arts, or music, A Preface to Paradise Lost by C.S. Lewis. I probably will end up reading other books this year that would have counted for that, but I thought since I'd read it, I might as well. Since it's talking about a book, then it counts for a book about literature. I actually think this was a pointless book to read. If you want to learn more about epic poetry in general, including a lot of the most well-known epic poems, I think this could be really interesting, but I had heard that somebody had read this before they read Paradise Lost and it helped them to understand it. I actually didn't have that experience. I actually found this harder to understand than Paradise Lost itself, which I think is kind of funny. There were a few parts where I just kind of skimmed over a section because it wasn't applicable to what I was trying to read it for. Eventually, I will probably come back to this and read it knowing what it's completely about and just enjoy learning about it. But I'm already pretty familiar with epic poems, and so it wasn't really necessary for me to read it. So then I did finish Paradise Lost. I also have Paradise Regained in this edition, but I didn't read that. I enjoyed my reading of Paradise Lost because I've always wanted to read it, and I think it was very interesting. There were a few passages that were really beautiful, but then at the same time, they were beautiful, but I didn't like the sentiment. It's Satan speaking, and it's hard to want to write down that quote when it's beautifully written, but I don't like what it's saying. By the end, there were definitely a few times where I would realize that I had read a few pages and had completely zoned out. But for the most part, I found it pretty understandable and interesting. Is it a favorite? No, but I am glad I read it. And there was one passage that I'll read that I really loved. So heavenly love shall outdo hellish hate, giving to death and dying to redeem. So dearly to redeem what hellish hate so easily destroyed and still destroys in those who, when they may, accept not grace. I thought that was a really good one. And like I said, there's other passages in here I underlined, but I don't really love what they said. I just wanted to write, this is beautiful but sad. And that was for the Living Heritage High School curriculum on G3. And so you had to look through their curriculum, and that was one of the books they had in it. The next book I used for my Inklings Literary Society with my mom, but it also ended up being the January pick for Emma at a Bookish Princess's book club. And that was The Scarlet Pimpernell by Baroness Orczy. I loved this too. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I knew it was the French Revolution, and I have seen the movie with Jane Seymour, but it's been so long since I've seen it, probably 20 or 30 years, and so I don't really remember anything about it. And so I went in not knowing the story. All I knew was I could remember seeing her in it, and I remembered a part where I thought that there was like a sword fight or something, but that ends up not being in the book. So the only thing I really remembered besides the actress was something that's not in the book. I really loved her writing. I really loved the story. I just realized, I looked at the back of the book and I realized that if I had read the back, which I've told you sometimes I don't do, if I know for sure I want to read something, that I would have been spoiled for who the Scarlet Pimpernel was if I had read the back, because I didn't know who he was at first. And I thought it was one person that it wasn't, and then a little bit into the book I'm like, okay, wait, I think it's this person instead, and then I was right. But the Scarlet Pimpernel is someone who has brought together a group of people to help smuggle people out of France during the French Revolution. And there's one guy who is trying to figure out who he is, and I just found it to be so much fun, and it felt like something that could have been written right now. It was so well done. I really enjoyed the discussion with Emma's book club, and I can't wait to discuss it with my mom. I also did the Read in the New Year Readathon in January. For those prompts, there was lose weight, read a book that is under 250 pages. I counted Tucker's Countryside for that. There was Eat Healthy, read a book that has food as part of the story or on the cover. I used Travels with Charlie for that because he did talk about food a lot in it. Number 3 was Drink More Water, read a book that has water on the cover or in the title. And for that, I read this, The Borrower's Afloat by Mary Norton. I did not realize when I started reading this that this was book 3 in the series, so I skipped book 2 apparently. And I thought this was cute, just as cute as the first one. It wasn't anything super exciting or the best book I've ever read, but it's cute. Number 4 was Social Media Detox, read a book that is set in the past or is historical fiction, and I used Paradise Lost for that. Number 5, Make a New Friend, read a book by a new to you author. And for that, I used Hollywood Heroes by Frank Turek and Zach Turek. In this book, they go through different superhero movies and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and they use different people and situations in those books to talk about how we can use them to point back to Christ. And I thought this was really good. I really liked their writing style throughout the book. I don't know who wrote which parts. I don't think it specified that. It was a really fun read. A couple of quotes I really loved from it were these. Our hearts are restless until we find our rest in God. And Jesus, not humanity, is the source of our power. And then another one was, He is the lion and the lamb. Number 6 was Exercise More, read a book in the series. And so I used Sign of 4 for that since it's a series of Sherlock Holmes. And then number 7, Save Money, read a book that you didn't buy or pay for. And so I used Beautiful Disguise for that because that was one that my husband had bought me on a date night once. So the last book I read wasn't for any of those challenges, and it was a complete impulse buy and read. I talked about this in my January haul. It was Haley Mills' Memoir, Forever Young. This book was also one that made me read slowly because I would read about people and then I would go and research more into them and read about different places like the Gardens of Allah in Los Angeles. And I would go read more about it. When I was finished with the part where she was talking about the behind the scenes of Pollyanna, then I stopped reading and watched the movie last Sunday. I kind of wanted to do that with a few of the other movies, but she didn't go into as much detail on very many of them. I found that the first half of this book, it was a pretty long book, and about the first half of it I loved. And I thought this is going to be one of my favorite books of the year maybe, but of the month especially. I loved seeing the behind the scenes of these movies that I grew up watching and loving. But then it took kind of a turn. When it got to about Summer Magic, she stopped giving very many details of the actual movies. And it was mostly about how the movies came to be, just telling which movies she was in, and then things that were going on in her family and personal life. I found it to be really sad because I really liked her father. He plays the dad in Swiss Army Robinson, and I really liked him. But her mom, I did not like. And she talks positively about her mom. She talks in a way that kind of tries to excuse, I think, a lot of her mom's behavior, but I didn't like her. And I feel like if she had had a stronger mom, or a mom that was not an alcoholic, I just feel like that some things could have gone differently for her. When she ended up marrying a man that was over 30 years older than her, I was just pretty sad, realizing that she did that. And then it cut off. It cut off right after she had her first children. And then it didn't give any more of the information of what happened after she and that man got divorced. It didn't go into what I was hoping it would, with the second and third Parent Traps that were made when she was an adult, that I loved when I was a kid. And when I was in junior high, I loved Saved by the Bell, and I had watched Good Morning Miss Bliss before Saved by the Bell, where that was like the prequel to Saved by the Bell, and she was the teacher on that. And so I thought she was going to give some information on those, and she did not. It didn't go into anything past I think it was the 70s when she had her children. And so that was disappointing. So I would say the first half of this book is really fun, and the second half is not. It was hard to pick which book was my favorite book this month, but it ended up being A Beautiful Disguise by Rosanna M. White. This was my favorite. I was surprised at how many 4.5 and above stars I had, but this one definitely had to come out as my favorite reading experience of the month. But I did have 4 that were in the running, and the other ones were Under the Banner of Heaven, Travels with Charlie, The Sign of 4, and probably the closest to getting it, The Scarlet Pimpernell. I would love to hear if you've read any of these books and enjoyed them or didn't enjoy them, and what your favorite books were in January.